Hey there, Emmanuel here from WebDevFuel and welcome back. In this video, we're going to go over a few points of why I think that you should learn to program in Go. So, if you're already programming in another language or you're starting to learn how to program, then this is going to help you better understand if you should learn to program in Go. First of all, Go is a very simple language and it only has 25 keywords, which means that once you get the gist of it and when you start learning how Go works, what the keywords are, how you should define a function, how you should define a struct, or for example, how you should do a for loop, then it becomes very easy for you to just get in the zone, start programming, get something that in your mind that you want to get done, a project or a particular feature of a web application, and then you can just start programming, start writing code, and it is very easy for you to just get in the flow and not have to constantly look up what the syntax is or how you should do something in the language. So for example, I sometimes also program in Elixir. I used to program more in Rust, now I don't as much, but in both of those languages I constantly had to go on the internet and look up what the syntax is. So I still do program a lot in Elixir, and when I do, I constantly have to look up how to do some things when it comes to enums or how to do basic operations in the language, because the language is much more complex than Go is. Now, the fact is that it is not a bad thing about Elixir that it is more complex. Some languages have more features, but it is a strong point of Go that it is very simple. Now, some people don't like that because it sometimes can lead to a lot of boilerplate code, but in my opinion, it makes for a very nice experience, not only because it is simpler to read the Go code after you write it, because it is very simple, there's not a lot of features to the language, but it also means, like I previously said, that once you start writing a feature, once you sit down to write code, you don't have to constantly exit out of your code editor to go look up a particular way of doing something in the language, and instead you can just get into the flow and start writing code. The second point is that it is highly useful on the web. So if you are a web developer, and this channel is WebDevFuel, so this is our focus here on the channel, it is very good for you to learn Go because the language has a lot of functionality and a lot of features built in that helps you with the web. So some popular projects in the Go community include Kubernetes. We also have Docker and also ESBuild. And this means that you can essentially connect or integrate with these projects in a much easier way if you already are working with Go in your project. So for example, if you have let's say a web application that needs to spawn a Docker container, or if you have, for example, let's say a setup where you want to let your user, for example, create a new server, and then that server would be a Docker container. So in that situation, it would be much easier for you to interact with Docker because for example, the Docker HTTP client works much better in Go. It is a first party sort of implementation. So it is much easier for you to sort of work with those projects. That also is the case for Kubernetes and ESBuild. There's not so much of a direct integration that you would need to do, but if you want to sort of build, let's say, a plugin for ESBuild or extend the functionality, then it is much easier for you to hop into the code and modify some parts that you might need to modify that best suit your current project. So in general, again, this means that the Go ecosystem is very, very strong when it comes to the web. And if you're a web developer, then it is going to benefit you a lot to learn Go. And the second point here is that the standard library already has all of the key necessary pieces to run HTTP servers. So you could build an entire HTTP server without using any third-party libraries. Now, usually when I build my projects, I like to include some third-party packages. For example, I really like to use the She router because it provides sort of a nice abstraction over the standard library implementation, and it gives some additional features like middleware and those kinds of things. But you could implement again an entire HTTP server with a very nice interface, a very nice API that the standard library provides us with, without having to use any third-party packages. And another point also about the She router is that the She router integrates very nicely with the standard library, and this means that if you have another package that you want to sort of bolt onto your tech stack, then it is very easy to do so because all of the types and all of the interfaces match very nicely with the standard library. So this is also a very strong point of Go, while other languages have additional implementations or third-party packages to implement those things. So if we think of a language, for example, like Rust, if you want to implement an HTTP server, then you would have to use a third-party package. With Elixir, the same case. So I think we have in the Elixir ecosystem the Cowboy package that provides the HTTP implementation and allows us to build HTTP servers. And that is not, again, the case with Go. So it is a very strong point, and it makes the language very nice to work with in a web context. Then we have this point that while it is a very simple language, we don't have a lot of keywords and we can get the gist of it pretty quickly. We can learn it. So I would say if you already are a web developer or programmer, then you could learn it in, I would say, like a week, 2 weeks max. And if you're not, it might take you a little longer, but it is a very simple language. And while that is the case, it still has a lot of quote-unquote advanced concepts. And I put here advanced in quotation marks because it depends on the on where you are on your web development journey. But it has very nice concepts that, first of all, teaches you about important programming concepts. So since the language has these concepts, if you don't already know about them, then using the language is going to force you to learn them, which is usually not the case, let's say, for example, with JavaScript. My experience has been that when I first started programming and I learned JavaScript and I learned how to use Node.js, it sort of abstracted away so much stuff that I didn't really have to think about what was happening. And when I migrated to Go, when I started learning Go, I became a better web developer because I was forced to think about those concepts and look at the language and think why some things were done in the way they were done. And then it also helps us build more robust web applications in general and web servers. So we have here the points that I think are, again, quote-unquote, more advanced concepts in the Go ecosystem. So first of all, we have error handling. So when I was programming in JavaScript, I very rarely handled errors, to be honest, and it was honestly not even something that I would think about. I knew about try catch. In some situations I would use it, but I didn't even have this concept of errors as values or throwing an exception, all those things. I started to get more into those topics and started to search more about them and trying to understand them once I started to learn Go. So we have, first of all, this point of error handling, and Go sort of helps you better understand also how your program works and at what points you should handle your errors and in what ways. So this also ties into the point of a robust web application and a robust program in general, because it forces us to think about what we want to do, if we want to return sort of a default value, if we want to just crash the program altogether, which are things that usually when we are working with JavaScript, I would say a majority of programmers that work with JavaScript don't really think about these things. And once we start learning Go, we sort of are forced to think about these things, which makes the language very good, not only because it forces us, but because as a result we also get a more robust web application as a result. Then we also have concurrency and parallelism. So in JavaScript, again, we sort of just let the language take care of that. If we might want to do something in the background, then we usually use the promise API, and we don't really think about what's happening. While in Go, I think that because we have to sort of spawn a Go routine, and then we have a way to communicate between processes, we get a much better understanding, and we start to better understand how the CPU works and how the operating system, more specifically in this case, works when it comes to spawning Go routines and how they basically work. So this sort of forces us to not only learn again these concepts, but it also helps us with building more robust web applications, because we have this ability to sort of do something in the background while our main thread is sort of doing the main work that we are currently doing. Then we also have the compilation. So this is also a point that I never really thought about before learning Go. So we have these build steps. We have the ability to essentially build a binary from our entire project. And we have to think about the different targets that we might be building for. So if you are on, for example, Mac OS and you want to build for Linux, you have to think about that beforehand. And I think that it is a good introduction if you're not already familiar with compiled languages. In general, I think Go is a much better introduction than other more complex languages like, let's say, C or Rust. So if you're coming from a JavaScript ecosystem, and if you have never worked with a compiled language, I think that Go is a very nice introduction for you on that aspect. Again, not only because it teaches you about those important programming concepts, there's always these two things that I think Go has going for it, but it also helps us build more robust web applications, because since this is a compiled language, we get all the errors beforehand. So we have a typing system. If we have some kind of mistake inside our web application, we get that error when we are compiling our program. And then it also means that the program runs faster because it is compiled. Then we have pointers and memory management in general. So just like with the other cases, when I was using JavaScript, I never really thought about memory or even what a pointer was. So if I'm not mistaken, in JavaScript, everything is copied. So you don't really have a concept of a pointer to something in memory, but in Go we have the ability to either have a value itself. So for example, if we have a string, we can have that string being passed as a value or as a pointer to that value, which means that it doesn't get copied, it only gets referenced in memory. And this helps us build better programs, because in some situations we don't really need to copy an entire part of our web application. For example, when we give it to a function, we can simply pass the pointer, and in that way we save memory and we build more so we build faster web applications in general, and also more robust ones. So one example that I can give you of this is that, for example, if you instantiate a new database connection, we don't need to copy that database connection when we pass it into a function. We can simply pass the pointer to it, and then the function can reference the database connection. So it is usually, let's say, a struct that we get back after we initialize a database connection. And in this case, it is usually a pointer to a struct. So if we are using something like PGX in the Go ecosystem to initialize a new connection to a PostgreSQL database, then we always get a pointer back instead of a value itself. And these things, I never really thought about them before learning Go, and it sort of provided me with a nice way and a simple way to learn about them, than if I would try to learn these concepts from a more complex language like, let's say, Rust or C. And the final concept that Go teaches us about and also allows us to build more robust web applications is type systems. So in the side of JavaScript and TypeScript, we have a way of having a strongly typed language. So we have TypeScript, but I don't really think that is a good implementation of a type system. First of all, we have the fact that TypeScript is sort of a abstraction on top of JavaScript. It is really not a true type system, and JavaScript doesn't really enforce the type system, and that is not the case with Go. So in Go, I think that the type system helps us build much more robust web applications than the type system in TypeScript, and a lot of concepts that Go has going for it in its type system. I think that it makes it a much robust language when compared to TypeScript. So we have an example of this, which are the receiver methods, which I think is a great feature of the language. So we can have a struct, we have a structure that we define with different fields, and then we can essentially attach a method to that struct. Then we also have interfaces, which are very different from TypeScript's interfaces. In this case, a Go interface can have multiple functions that we define with a particular shape. And then if, for example, a struct has a bunch of different receiver methods and that shape matches what the shape of the interface is, then Go is going to accept it. What I essentially mean by this is that we don't have to explicitly implement that interface, but rather if it sort of adheres to the shape that the interface is looking for, then Go is going to accept it, because we can essentially have the assurance that that interface is actually implemented, even though it is not explicitly done so. And then we also have a nice concept, which is type coercion. So if we pass, for example, an interface into a function, or the any type, which is an alias to the interface type, then we can sort of do a check on that any type and sort of narrow down what that type can be. We can also use that to sort of check what the error type is on a particular function, and that also sort of helps us build more robust applications, because we don't have to specify what the type is all the time. Now, this is not recommended to be used across our entire web application or across an entire project, but there are some points where it is very useful to have an any type, and then be able to sort of check if this is of this type, then I want to do this. If it matches a different type, then I want to have a different logic, and so on. So these are the points, and these are the reasons that I think that you should learn Go. I think it is a very nice language to work with, while again, it is a very explicit language. It is a very verbose language. I don't think that's a bad sign all the time. So sometimes explicitness also means that the program is very easy to read, it is very easy to modify, and we can easily hop into a code base and very quickly understand what is happening. And this is one of the things that people usually mention about Go when they say that they like Go, is that we can quickly hop onto a code base and quickly understand exactly what's happening. So in my case, I made some contribution to different open source projects, and even to those that I didn't really make a contribution and I only sort of took a look at the code and saw exactly what's happening. It was very easy for me to hop into the code base and very quickly understand it, and that's because Go is a very simple language. And again, it is also a very robust language. It provides us with features that helps us create correct programs and robust programs, and I think that is a great thing. So with this being said, these are the points where I think you should learn Go. And if you enjoyed this video, then leave a like below. Let me know in the comments also what you think about Go in general, and if you're learning Go, what your experience has been. And I'll see you on the next video. And actually, before I forget, if you want to learn how to build web applications with HTMX, Go, PostgreSQL, Temple, and other technologies, then go to webdevfuel.com/HGSB or click the link in the description down below.